When Reed Holloway saw a widow and her children eating scraps behind a frozen restaurant, he made a decision that would change 5 lives forever. In 1883 Montana Territory, showing mercy to a thief's widow could cost you everything: your reputation, your business, even your life. But sometimes the hardest choice is the only human one. This is a story of survival, redemption, and a family forged not by blood, but by a single moment of compassion in the bitter cold. Stay until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The wind that December night didn't howl. It screamed. It came down from the mountains like something wounded and furious, tearing through the narrow streets of Clemens Ridge, Montana Territory, carrying with it the kind of cold that made men question whether spring would ever return. Reed Holloway had his head down against it, collar turned up, hat pulled low, moving through the darkness with the practiced gait of a man who'd learned long ago that the world didn't care whether you were ready for what it threw at you. He'd been at the Mercantile, settling accounts, staying later than he should have because avoiding the empty ranch house had become something of a habit. 2 years now since Sarah died. 2 years since he'd buried her and the son who never drew breath, laid them both in the frozen ground on a day much like this one. The house still smelled like her sometimes, or maybe that was just his mind playing tricks, holding on to something that was already gone. Reed wasn't a large man, but he was built like the work he did. Lean, hard, weathered by 34 years of Montana winters and summers that were nearly as brutal. His face was all angles and sunlines, his hands scarred and capable, his eyes the color of weathered denim. People in town said he'd gotten quieter after Sarah passed, that the light had gone out of him. They weren't wrong. He was cutting through the alley behind Morrison's restaurant when he heard it, a sound so small it almost got lost in the wind. A child's voice, thin and frightened. Reed stopped, every instinct suddenly alert. He'd heard coyotes make sounds almost human on cold nights, but this was different. This was real. The alley was dark, lit only by the pale spill of lamplight from Morrison's back window. Reed moved toward the sound, and that's when he saw them. A woman, thin as a fence post, was crouched beside 3 wooden crates pushed against the restaurant's back wall, trying to shield 2 children from the wind with her own body. The children, a boy maybe 7 or 8, a little girl who couldn't have been more than 5, were pressed against her, their clothes threadbare and inadequate, their faces hollow with the kind of hunger that takes weeks to carve into young bones. The woman was dividing something in her hands, breaking it into pieces with fingers that trembled from more than just cold. Biscuits, Reed realized. Hard, leftover biscuits, probably pulled from Morrison's trash. She was giving the larger pieces to the children, keeping almost nothing for herself. "Eat slow," she was telling them, her voice hoarse and gentle. "Make it last. That's all there is tonight." Reed felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been frozen solid for 2 years. The little girl looked up then, and her eyes caught the lamplight. They were huge in her thin face, dark and frightened and so tired. She clutched the biscuit in both hands like it was precious, like it was everything. "Mama," she whispered, "I'm still hungry." The woman's face, God, her face. She pulled the child closer, and Reed saw her fighting tears, fighting the complete helplessness of having nothing more to give. "I know, baby. I know. Just eat what you have. We'll find something tomorrow." But there wouldn't be anything tomorrow. Reed knew that sound in a parent's voice, the sound of someone lying to their child because the truth was too terrible to speak aloud. He'd heard his own mother use that same tone 30 years ago, before she died and left him and his sister Emma alone in a world that didn't care whether children starved or survived. The memory hit him like a physical blow. Emma, 8 years old, dividing a single potato between them. Emma, telling him to eat her share because he was smaller. Emma, dying that winter while he watched, helpless and small and useless. Reed stepped forward before he knew he was going to move. "Ma'am?" The woman's head snapped up, her body immediately shifting to put herself between Reed and the children. Her face was young, mid-20s maybe, but worn hard by circumstances. She had good bones beneath the hunger, dark hair coming loose from a threadbare scarf, and eyes that held equal parts fear and defiance. "We're not causing trouble," she said quickly. "We'll move on. We were just—" "How long since you ate?" Reed interrupted. His voice came out rougher than he intended. The woman's jaw tightened. That's not your concern. How long? She stared at him, this stranger emerging from the darkness, and something in his face must have convinced her he wasn't going to hurt them because her shoulders sagged slightly. 2 days. Real food, I mean. We've had scraps. 2 days. Reed looked at the children again. The boy was watching him with wary, old eyes, one thin arm wrapped protectively around his sister. The little girl had started crying silently, tears cutting clean tracks through the dirt on her face. Reed felt rage, clean and pure, burning through the numbness that had become his constant companion. Not rage at this woman, but at a world that let children eat garbage in the cold while men like Morrison threw away more food than these three could eat in a week. Come with me, he said. The woman shook her head immediately. No, thank you, but Morrison's is still open. I'll buy you a meal. I can't. I don't have money to... Did I ask for money? Reed kept his voice level, gentle, the way he'd talk to a spooked horse. I'm offering a meal. Hot food. For you and your children. The woman looked at her children, then back at Reed, and he could see the war happening behind her eyes. Pride versus desperation, caution versus need. He'd seen that same look in the mirror often enough to recognize it. Why? She asked finally. Why would you do that? Reed could have told her about Emma, about Sarah, about the 2 years he'd spent wondering if there was any point to waking up each morning when everyone he loved was already dead. He could have told her that seeing her children's faces had been like looking back through time at himself and his sister, helpless and starving. Instead, he just said, because it's cold and they're hungry and I can help. That's reason enough. The woman studied his face for a long moment. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her because she nodded slowly. All right. Thank you. We'll pay you back somehow. Let's just get you fed first. Reed led them around to Morrison's front entrance. The woman keeping the children close, her body still tensed like she expected this kindness to turn into a trap. Reed didn't take offense. He'd learned that survival made people careful, and careful kept you alive. Morrison's was nearly empty, just a few late customers lingering over coffee. The owner, Gerald Morrison, was behind the counter, a thick man with a florid face and the kind of permanent scowl that came from years of viewing everyone as either a customer or a problem. Reed guided the woman and children to a table near the stove, where the heat was strongest. The little girl made a small sound of relief as the warmth hit her, immediately reaching her hands toward it. 3 plates, Reed told Morrison when the man approached, his eyes already narrowing at the sight of Reed's companions. Stew, bread, milk for the children, whatever you've got hot. Morrison didn't move. He was staring at the woman, his face darkening. That's Mara Ellington. The woman, Mara, went very still. Reed looked between them, sensing something bad coming. I know exactly who she is, Morrison continued, his voice rising. The thief's widow. Got some nerve showing your face here, Mara. Mara's face had gone pale, but she lifted her chin. My husband wasn't a thief. That's not what the mine company said. Owen Ellington stole from them, and he died because he was a thief and a coward. That's not true. $300 he took. $300 that your family still owes. Morrison crossed his thick arms. So no, you don't get to eat here. You don't get to sit in my establishment like decent people. You're the widow of a thief, and as far as I'm concerned, that makes you... Reed stood up. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make any sudden movements, but something in the way he rose, slow and deliberate, made Morrison stop talking. You'll watch your mouth, Reed said quietly. Morrison blinked, seeming to remember that Reed was there. Now, Reed, I know you're trying to be charitable, but you don't understand the situation. I understand just fine. You're insulting a woman and her children who are hungry and cold. What I don't understand is why you think that's acceptable. Her husband was a thief. Was he? Reed's voice was still quiet, but something in it made people at other tables turn to look. Were you there? Did you see him steal? The mine company said, I asked what you saw. Morrison's face was getting redder. Everyone knows Owen Ellington took that money before the mine collapsed. He died in that collapse because he was down there where he shouldn't have been. He died trying to get the men out, Mara said, her voice shaking but firm. He died trying to save them, and he never stole anything. They blamed him because he was asking questions about safety, about the timber supports, about things that weren't his business. Morrison cut her off. Your husband made accusations, Mara. He stirred up trouble. And when that mine came down, he got what was coming to him along with 6 other men. The company found money missing from the office, and Owen was the last one in there. Facts are facts. The facts are that my husband is dead, and I have 2 children to feed, and everything we had is gone. Mara's voice cracked. We're not asking for charity. We're not asking for anything except to be left alone. You're still in debt, $300. Until that's paid. How much? Reed interrupted. Morrison turned to him. What? How much does she owe for the debt you say her husband left? $300, like I said, but what's that got to do with... And how much are meals here? For 3 people. Morrison's eyes narrowed suspiciously. $1.50. Reed reached into his coat and pulled out a leather wallet. He counted out bills slowly, precisely, and set them on the table. 300 and 150. That's 300 for the debt, he said, and $1.50 for tonight's meal. The debt is paid in full. Now bring the food. The restaurant had gone completely silent. Morrison stared at the money like it might bite him. Reed, you can't be serious. You're going to pay off the debt of a thief? I'm paying off a debt you claim exists. Whether it's legitimate or not isn't my concern right now. What concerns me is that there are 2 children at this table who haven't eaten in 2 days, and you're standing here running your mouth instead of feeding them. So either you bring the food I've paid for, or I take my money back and we walk across the street to the hotel restaurant, and I make sure everyone in town knows why. Morrison's face worked through several expressions: anger, confusion, calculation. Finally, greed won. He snatched up the bills. Fine, but don't think this makes her respectable. Don't think... The food, Morrison. Now. The owner stomped away toward the kitchen, muttering under his breath. Reed sat back down and found Mara staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Shock, gratitude, confusion, maybe fear. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. I know. I can't pay you back. I don't have anything. I didn't ask you to. Why? The word came out almost desperate. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. Reed looked at her children. The boy, Caleb, was still watching him with those 2 old eyes, suspicious and wary. But the little girl, Junie, had relaxed slightly in the warmth of the restaurant, her thin shoulders dropping, her breathing evening out. Had a sister once, Reed said quietly. Emma. She died when she was 8. Starved to death the winter after our parents died. I watched it happen. Couldn't do anything about it. I was only 6. He paused, his throat tight. Been a long time since I thought I could do anything about anything, but I can do something about tonight. Mara's eyes had filled with tears. I'm sorry. About your sister. Me too. Morrison returned with 3 plates of stew, dropping them on the table with more force than necessary, along with a basket of bread and 2 cups of milk. He didn't say anything, just turned and walked away, his back stiff with anger. Reed pushed the plates toward Mara and the children. Eat. Caleb looked at his mother, waiting for permission. Mara nodded, and both children fell on the food like they were afraid it might disappear. It hurt to watch, the desperate way they ate, barely chewing, like they couldn't trust there would be more. Slow down, Mara said gently, though she was crying openly now. Slow down, babies. It's okay. Take your time. But they couldn't slow down. Their bodies knew starvation, knew scarcity, knew that food was never guaranteed. Reed turned away, giving them privacy in their hunger, and found himself looking out the window at the darkness and falling snow. Behind him, he heard Junie's small voice. Mama, is this real? Are we really eating? Yes, baby, yes. It's real. Reed closed his eyes against the burning in them. When he opened them again, he found Mara looking at him over her children's heads. She mouthed 2 words. Thank you. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. They ate in silence, the children working through their meals with single-minded focus, while Mara ate more slowly, more carefully, like she was still rationing even now. Reed ordered them seconds, then thirds, until finally Caleb leaned back in his chair with a small sigh, looking almost dazed. "I'm full," he said, like he couldn't quite believe it. "Mama, I'm full." Mara put a hand on his head, smoothing back his hair with a tenderness that made Reed's chest ache. "Good. That's good, Caleb." Junie had fallen asleep in her chair, her head pillowed on her thin arms, her face finally relaxed. She looked younger asleep, more like the 5-year-old she should have been, less like the tiny survivor she'd been forced to become. "Where are you staying?" Reed asked quietly. Mara's face closed down immediately, defensive. "We have a place." "Mara?" She looked away. "In the old Miller barn, outside of town. It's dry, mostly. It's 10 degrees outside, colder with the wind. It's what we have." "Not anymore." She looked back at him sharply. "What?" Reed hadn't planned this, hadn't thought it through, but looking at these 3 people, this woman who'd been feeding her children garbage, these children who'd learned to be grateful for scraps, he heard Sarah's voice in his head as clearly as if she were sitting beside him. "You know what you have to do, Reed. You've always known." "You're coming home with me," he said. "You and the children, to my ranch." Mara shook her head immediately. "No, absolutely not. You're freezing to death in that barn. We're surviving. You're dying slowly. There's a difference. I can't just go home with a strange man. I have my children to think about. I can't." "You think I'd hurt them?" Reed kept his voice gentle, but he needed her to understand. "Mara, look at me. Really, look at me." She did, her dark eyes searching his face with desperate intensity, trying to find the lie, the trap, the danger. "I lost my wife 2 years ago," Reed continued. "She died having our son. Lost them both. My house is empty. Has been empty. I got 3 bedrooms sitting there with no one in them, a stove that's kept burning for no reason, and more food than one man needs. You want to repay me for dinner? Then come use what I'm not using anyway. Stay warm. Keep your children safe. That's payment enough." "People will talk," Mara said, but he could hear her resistance weakening. "People are already talking. Morrison will have this story all over town by morning. Might as well give them something real to talk about." This is crazy. I don't even know you." "Name's Reed Holloway. I run a horse ranch about 5 miles north of here. I'm 34 years old. I pay my debts, I keep my word, and I don't hurt women or children. That's all you need to know tonight." Mara looked at her children, Caleb trying to stay awake, fighting sleep, and Junie already lost to it. He saw the moment she broke, the moment survival instinct overrode pride and fear. "Just for tonight," she whispered. "For as long as you need. I'll work. I'll earn our keep. I'm good with horses. I can cook, clean, anything you need. We'll figure that out tomorrow. Tonight, let's just get you somewhere warm." Reed paid Morrison for the meals. The man took the money with poor grace and then carefully lifted Junie into his arms. The little girl weighed almost nothing, all bird bones and fragile hope. She stirred slightly, mumbling something, then settled against his shoulder with a small sigh. Mara helped Caleb to his feet. The boy was swaying with exhaustion, but he kept his hand in his mother's, watching Reed with continued wariness. "My wagon's out front," Reed said quietly. They walked out into the night, into wind that had gotten worse while they were inside. Snow was falling harder now, the kind of storm that could turn deadly if you were caught in it unprepared. Reed settled Junie carefully onto the wagon bench, wrapping her in the heavy blanket he kept there, then helped Mara and Caleb up beside her. "Might be a rough ride," he warned, climbing up into the driver's seat. "Storm's getting worse." "We'll manage," Mara said, pulling both children close. Reed snapped the reins and the wagon lurched forward into the darkness, leaving behind the lights of Clemens Ridge and heading north toward his ranch. Toward home. The wind screamed around them, driving snow into their faces, making the horses nervous. Reed kept them steady, his hands sure on the reins, his body automatically making the adjustments needed to keep the wagon on the road he could barely see. Beside him, Mara was silent, holding her children against the wind. He could feel her fear, her uncertainty, radiating off her like heat. She'd put her trust in a stranger, let him take her and her children into the darkness, and now she was probably wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. "Used to make this run with my eyes closed," Reed said, just to break the silence. "Know every rock and turn." "How long have you had the ranch?" 8 years. Built the house myself, me and Sarah. She wanted it facing east so she could see the sunrise from the kitchen window. His voice caught slightly on his wife's name. She was real particular about that sunrise. "I'm sorry about your wife." "Me too." They rode in silence for a while longer. Then Caleb's voice, small and almost lost in the wind. "Is your house really warm?" Reed looked down at the boy. "Warmest place in Montana Territory," he said. "Got a stove in the kitchen that puts out heat like summer. Got fireplaces in every bedroom, and I got beds with quilts this thick." He held his hands apart to show him. "You'll be so warm you might forget what cold feels like." "That sounds nice," Caleb said softly. "It is nice. You'll see." But before they could see anything, the wagon wheel hit ice. Reed felt it happen. The sudden sideways lurch, the loss of traction. He tried to correct, pulling hard on the reins, but the horses panicked, pulling in opposite directions. The wagon tilted, and for one terrible moment Reed thought they were going over. "Hold on!" he shouted. The wagon slammed back down with a crack that sounded like breaking bone. The front axle, Reed realized with sinking dread. They'd broken the front axle. The horses settled, nervous but calming under Reed's steady hand. Reed set the brake and climbed down to assess the damage, already knowing what he'd find. The axle was split clean through. They weren't going anywhere in this wagon. Reed looked around, trying to orient himself in the blowing snow. They were maybe 3 miles from the ranch. 3 miles in a blizzard, with 2 children who were already exhausted and half frozen. He climbed back up onto the wagon. Mara was looking at him with frightened eyes. "Axle's broken," he said. "Can't fix it here." "How far are we?" 3 miles. Maybe a little less. Mara looked at her children, then at the darkness beyond the wagon. "We can walk it." "In this storm?" "You said 3 miles. We can do 3 miles." Reed studied her face, the determination there, the fierce protectiveness. She would walk through hell itself if it meant keeping her children alive. He understood that, respected it. "All right," he said. "But we do this smart. I'll carry Junie. You help Caleb. We stick together, we move steady, and we don't stop until we reach the house." "I can walk," Caleb protested, but his voice was weak. "I know you can," Reed said, "but it'll be faster if I help. That okay with you?" The boy nodded reluctantly. Reed lifted Junie carefully, wrapping her completely in the blanket until only her face showed, then settled her against his chest inside his open coat, giving her his body heat. The little girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Where are we?" she mumbled. "Going home, baby," Mara said, stroking her daughter's face. "Going somewhere warm." Reed helped Mara and Caleb down from the wagon, then unhitched the horses and turned them loose. They'd find their way to the ranch eventually. Horses were smart that way. "Ready?" he asked. Mara took Caleb's hand in hers, wrapping her other arm around him. "Ready." They walked into the storm. The wind was brutal, driving snow into their faces like needles, stealing their breath, making every step a battle. Reed led the way, Junie's weight in his arms, her small face pressed against his chest. Behind him, he could hear Mara's ragged breathing, could hear her talking to Caleb in a steady stream of encouragement. "That's it, baby. 1 foot, then the other. We're almost there. You're doing so good. I'm so proud of you." But they weren't almost there. They were maybe a mile in, with 2 more to go, and already Reed could feel Caleb struggling. The boy was trying, God, he was trying, but his little body had been pushed beyond its limits. Reed stopped. "Mara." She looked at him, snow coating her hair and eyelashes. "Give me Caleb." "What?" "I'll carry them both. You're stronger without the weight." "You can't carry both." "Yes, I can. Trust me." Mara hesitated, then nodded. Reed carefully adjusted Junie so she was settled on his left hip, then crouched down. "Climb on, Caleb. Get on my back." The boy looked at his mother. Mara nodded, and Caleb slowly climbed onto Reed's back, wrapping his thin arms around Reed's neck, his legs around Reed's waist. Reed stood, adjusting to the weight. It hurt, his back protesting, his arms already aching, but he'd carried heavier loads. He'd manage. "Let's go," he said. They walked, and walked, and walked. Time stopped meaning anything. There was only the next step, and the next, and the next. Reed's world narrowed to the children in his arms, their weight, their warmth, the precious evidence that they were still alive. Behind him, Mara matched him step for step, never complaining, never asking to stop. Reed's legs were screaming. His arms had gone numb. Junie was a dead weight against his chest, either asleep or unconscious. He couldn't tell. Caleb's grip around his neck had loosened. The boy's body slumped against his back. "Mara," he said, his voice rough. "Talk to me. Need to know you're still there." "I'm here." Her voice was faint but steady. "I'm here, Reed. Tell me about Owen, your husband." "Why?" "Need to hear your voice. Need to know you're okay." Silence, then, "He was good. Owen was good. He loved our children more than anything. He worked hard. He tried to do right." Her voice broke. "He didn't steal anything. He wouldn't. But no one believes that. No one except me." "I believe you," Reed said. "Why?" "Because I've seen liars, and you're not one. Because Morrison's story doesn't make sense. And because a man who steals doesn't die trying to save other men." Mara made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh. "Thank you. Thank you for saying that." "We're going to clear his name," Reed said. The words came out without planning, but once they were said, he knew they were true. "I don't know how yet, but we will. I promise you that." "You don't have to." "I know, but I'm going to anyway." They kept walking. Reed's vision was starting to blur. His legs were barely responding to his commands. But somewhere ahead, through the snow, he could see a light, small, distant, but there. The ranch, home. "Almost there," he gasped. "See the light? That's the house. Just a little farther." "I see it," Mara said. "I see it, Reed." The last 100 yards were the hardest. Reed's body was shutting down, everything screaming for him to stop, to rest, to give up. But Sarah's voice was in his head again, fierce and loving. "Don't you dare quit, Reed Holloway. Don't you dare." The porch steps appeared out of the snow. Reed stumbled up them, barely keeping his balance, and kicked at the door. "Get the door," he told Mara. Can't use my hands." Mara rushed past him, shoving the door open. Heat poured out, blessed and beautiful. Reed stumbled inside and fell to his knees, still holding the children. "Close the door," he managed. "Get it closed." Mara slammed the door behind them, shutting out the storm. The sudden silence was shocking. Reed's arms had finally given up. He carefully laid Junie on the rug in front of the fireplace, then helped Caleb slide off his back. Both children were frighteningly still, their faces white, their lips blue. "We need to warm them," Reed said, his voice slurred with exhaustion. "Slow. Too fast will hurt them. Get blankets from the bedroom, down the hall, second door." Mara ran. Reed stripped off his soaked coat and boots, then carefully removed the children's wet clothes, checking them for frostbite. Their fingers and toes were white, but not black. That was good. That meant they might be okay. Mara returned with blankets, and together they wrapped the children, holding them close to the fire but not too close, letting the heat reach them gradually. "Talk to them," Reed said. "Keep them conscious if you can." "Caleb, baby, can you hear me?" Mara was crying, patting her son's face. "Caleb, please wake up." The boy's eyes fluttered open. "Mama?" "Yes, baby, yes, I'm right here." Are we home?" Mara looked at Reed and he saw the question in her eyes. He nodded. "Yes," she told her son. "Yes, we're home." Reed built up the fire while Mara tended to the children, and slowly, gradually, color began to return to their faces. Junie woke crying, which Reed took as a good sign. It meant she could feel again, that her body was warming. "Hurts," the little girl sobbed. "Mama, it hurts." "I know, baby, I know. That means you're getting warm. That's good. That's what we want." It took an hour before Reed was confident the children were out of danger. By then, all 4 of them were huddled in front of the fire, wrapped in blankets, too exhausted to move. "Thank you," Mara whispered. Reed, thank you. You saved their lives. You saved them, Reed corrected. You kept them alive this long. I just helped with one night. That one night made all the difference. Reed looked at the children, now sleeping peacefully, their faces relaxed, their breathing even. He looked at Mara, this fierce woman who'd walked 3 miles through a blizzard for her babies, and he realized that for the first time in 2 years, his house didn't feel empty. The bedrooms are made up, he said quietly. Take the children to bed. Real beds. Sleep as long as you need. What about you? I'll keep the fire going, make sure everything stays warm. Mara reached out and touched his hand. Just briefly, just a moment of contact, but it was the first time anyone had touched him with kindness since Sarah died. Thank you, she said again, for everything. Reed watched as she carried her children down the hall to the bedrooms, heard the soft sounds of them settling in. Then he sat alone in front of the fire, listening to the storm rage outside. And for the first time in 2 years, he felt something that might have been peace. He'd saved 3 lives tonight, 3 lives that might save him in return. Outside, the storm continued. But inside, in Reed Holloway's house, 4 lost souls were finally warm. Reed woke to the sound of someone moving in his kitchen. For a moment, disoriented in the gray light of early morning, he thought it was Sarah. His heart lifted with that terrible hope that sometimes came in the space between sleep and waking, before memory crashed back down and reminded him she was gone. But the sounds continued, quiet, careful movements, the soft clink of metal on metal. Reed pushed himself up from the chair where he'd spent the night, his back protesting, and moved toward the kitchen doorway. Mara stood at the stove, stirring something in a pot. She'd changed into one of Sarah's old dresses that Reed had never been able to bring himself to give away. It was too big on her thin frame. The sleeves rolled up, the waist cinched with a piece of rope. Her dark hair was pulled back, still damp from washing, and in the morning light streaming through the window, Reed could see how young she actually was beneath the wear of hard living. She turned when she heard him, startled. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. I just thought I wanted to make breakfast, to thank you. I hope it's okay that I... It's fine, Reed said, his voice rough with sleep. You didn't have to. I wanted to. I needed to do something. I can't just... She gestured helplessly. I can't just take and give nothing back. Reed moved to the coffee pot, finding it already made and hot. He poured himself a cup, breathing in the steam. How are the children? Still sleeping. They were so exhausted. Mara turned back to the stove, stirring with more vigor than necessary. Junie had nightmares. She kept crying out in her sleep. I held her until she settled. That's normal, after what they went through. After what I put them through, you mean? Mara's voice was tight, bitter. I'm their mother. I'm supposed to protect them, and instead I had them eating garbage and sleeping in a barn. You kept them alive. That's what matters. Barely. She set down the spoon with a sharp click. Do you know what that feels like? To watch your children starve and know there's nothing you can do? To see them get thinner every day, to hear them cry from hunger and have nothing to give them? Reed set down his coffee cup. Yeah, I do know. Mara looked at him, saw the truth in his face, and her anger deflated. Your sister. Emma. She was 8 when she died. I was 6. I watched her give me her food, watched her pretend she wasn't hungry, watched her waste away. Reed stared into his coffee. I was too young to understand what was happening until it was too late. By the time I realized she was dying, there was nothing I could do about it. I'm sorry, I can't imagine. Hope you never have to. Reed met her eyes. But Mara, you did better than my mother did. You kept fighting. You didn't give up. Your children are alive because of you. Mara's eyes filled with tears. She turned away quickly, wiping at her face with her sleeve. The oatmeal's almost ready. There's eggs too if you want them. Reed recognized the deflection for what it was. She'd exposed enough vulnerability for one morning. Oatmeal's good. Thank you. They ate in silence, Mara picking at her food like she still couldn't quite believe it was real and permanent. Reed watched her out of the corner of his eye, seeing the way she kept glancing toward the hallway, listening for her children. They're safe, he said quietly. You can relax. I don't know how anymore. Mara set down her spoon. It's been over a year since Owen died. A year of running, hiding, trying to survive. Every time I think we've found a place to rest, something happens. Someone recognizes us, or the debt collectors find us, or... She shook her head. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For someone to come take them away, or for you to change your mind, or for something to go wrong. Nothing's going wrong today. Today you're safe. But tomorrow? Reed didn't have an answer for that. He wanted to promise her that tomorrow would be safe too, and the day after that, and all the days to come. But he'd learned the hard way that the world didn't care about promises. Before he could respond, they heard small footsteps in the hallway. Caleb appeared, dressed in his too-thin clothes from yesterday, his hair sticking up in all directions. He stopped when he saw Reed, his body tensing. "Morning," Reed said easily. "Sleep okay?" The boy nodded, not speaking, his eyes wary. "Are you hungry?" Mara asked, moving to her son. "There's oatmeal and eggs." "Where's Junie?" "Still sleeping. Let her rest a while longer." Mara guided Caleb to a chair, setting a bowl in front of him. "Eat, baby." Caleb ate mechanically, his eyes never leaving Reed. Reed understood. The boy was protecting his mother, watching for threats. At 7 years old, he'd already learned that kindness could be a trap. "You like horses?" Reed asked. Caleb paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. "I guess. Got about 20 of them out in the barn. Need to feed them this morning. Check on them after last night's storm. Could use some help if you're interested." The boy looked at his mother. Mara gave a small nod. "Okay," Caleb said quietly. They finished breakfast in silence. Mara cleaned up while Reed put on his coat and boots, and then Caleb bundled up in his inadequate jacket and followed Reed outside. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. It lay thick and pristine across the ranch, glittering in the morning sun, beautiful and deadly. Reed's wagon sat abandoned where they'd left it, already half buried. He'd have to dig it out later, get it repaired. The barn was warm, the horses nickering in greeting when Reed opened the door. Caleb stopped just inside, his eyes going wide. "There's so many," he breathed. 23, actually, plus 2 mules and a donkey. Reed grabbed a bucket and began measuring out grain. "I breed them, train them, sell them. Best horses in 3 territories, or so people tell me." Caleb moved slowly down the aisle, looking at each horse with something like wonder. Reed watched him, seeing the tension gradually leave the boy's shoulders, seeing him relax for the first time since they'd met. "Can I pet one?" Caleb asked. "Sure. That bay mare there, she's gentle. Name's Sadie." Caleb reached out carefully, letting the horse sniff his hand before touching her neck. A smile broke across his face, small and tentative, but real. "She's soft," he said. "She likes you. Can tell by the way she's leaning in." They worked together in comfortable silence, Reed showing Caleb how to measure the grain, how to fill the water buckets, how to fork hay into the mangers. The boy was quick and careful, listening intently to every instruction. "You're good at this," Reed said. "Natural with horses." "My pa used to..." Caleb stopped, his face closing down. "Before." Reed didn't push. He just handed Caleb another bucket and kept working. "Did he really steal?" Caleb asked suddenly. "My pa. Did he steal money like they said?" Reed set down his bucket and crouched so he was at eye level with the boy. "What do you think? You knew your father. Was he a thief?" "No." The word was fierce, certain. "Pa was good. He wouldn't steal. He said lying and stealing were wrong, that a man's word was all he had." Caleb's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "But everyone says he did. Even Mama gets scared when people talk about it. So maybe they're right and I'm wrong. Or maybe they're wrong and you're right. But everyone says everyone can be wrong," Reed interrupted gently. "Happens all the time. People believe what's easy to believe, what fits with what they already think. Your father asked questions about the mine, about safety. That made him inconvenient. So when the mine collapsed and money went missing, he made a real convenient scapegoat." "What's a scapegoat?" "Someone you blame for things they didn't do because it's easier than finding the person who really did them." Caleb thought about this, his young face serious. "So you think my pa didn't steal?" I think your pa died trying to save men's lives. I think that's what matters. The boy's face crumpled. I miss him. I know, that's okay. Missing someone means they mattered, means they were worth missing. Caleb nodded, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. They finished the feeding in silence, but it was a different silence now, less wary, more comfortable. When they returned to the house, they found Junie awake, sitting at the kitchen table with Mara. The little girl was wearing one of Sarah's old nightgowns, the hem dragging on the floor, and she was eating oatmeal like it might disappear. Slow down, baby, Mara said gently. You'll make yourself sick. Junie looked up when Reed entered, her dark eyes huge in her thin face. Is this really your house? It is. And we can really stay? You can really stay. She considered this. Her spoon paused in midair. Forever? Reed glanced at Mara, saw the fear and hope warring in her expression. For as long as you need, he said carefully. No one's going to make you leave. Okay. Junie went back to her oatmeal, apparently satisfied. Children were like that, Reed remembered, able to accept new realities faster than adults, able to adapt and survive. The rest of that first day was quiet, almost peaceful. Mara insisted on cleaning the house, despite Reed's protest that it didn't need cleaning. The children explored cautiously, staying close together, touching everything with wonder. The real beds, the thick quilts, the books on shelves, the dishes in cupboards. Everything was new to them, or at least felt new after so long without. Reed spent the day doing his usual work, checking on the horses, fixing fence posts, repairing the wagon axle. But he found himself constantly aware of the sounds from the house, voices, footsteps, life. After 2 years of silence, it was strange and unsettling and somehow right. That evening, as Reed was finishing up in the barn, Mara appeared in the doorway. She'd changed into another of Sarah's dresses, and she'd pinned up her hair. She looked less like a desperate widow and more like the young woman she should have been. Dinner's ready, she said. If you're hungry. I'm hungry. They walked back to the house together, not talking, but the silence was comfortable. Inside, the kitchen was warm and smelled like stew and fresh bread. The children were already at the table, clean and dressed in improvised clothing, more of Sarah's old things, altered to fit as best as Mara could manage. They ate together, and for the first time, Reed didn't feel like he was sitting at his own table alone. The children were still quiet, still careful, but Junie smiled at him once, and Caleb actually asked a question about the horses. After dinner, while Mara cleaned up, Reed found himself telling the children about the ranch, about the horses and the work and the seasons. He hadn't talked this much in 2 years, hadn't had any reason to, but the children listened with rapt attention, especially when he told them about the foals that would be born in spring. Can we see them? Junie asked. When they're born? If you're still here, sure. We'll be here, Junie said with a child's certainty. We live here now. Reed didn't correct her, even though he knew it wasn't that simple. Nothing ever was. That night, after the children were in bed, Reed and Mara sat by the fire. She was mending one of Caleb's shirts, her fingers quick and practiced despite the poor light. They're getting comfortable, she said quietly. Too comfortable, maybe. They're starting to think this is permanent. Would that be so bad? Mara's hand stilled. Reed, we can't stay here forever. This isn't our home. You've been incredibly kind, but where else are you going to go? The question hung in the air between them. I don't know, Mara admitted finally. But I can't just stay here living off your charity, taking advantage. You're not taking advantage. You've cooked 3 meals today, cleaned my entire house, and I watched you mending clothes by firelight. That's not charity. That's earning your keep. It's not enough. Mara. Reed waited until she looked at him. I'm not asking you to stay forever. I'm not asking you for anything except to let your children be warm and fed and safe. Can you do that? Can you let them have this for a while? Mara's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared. I'm scared that if they get used to this, it'll hurt worse when we have to leave. Then don't leave. It's not that simple. Why not? Because, Mara set down her mending, her hands shaking. Because people talk, Reed. Because you're a single man and I'm a widow, and if I stay here, people will say things. They'll say I'm my what? My housekeeper? Because that's what you are. You know that's not what they'll say. Reed did know. He'd already thought about it, about what Morrison would tell people, about what the gossips in town would make of Reed Holloway taking in the thief's widow. He didn't care. "Let them talk," he said. "Long as your children are safe, what does it matter?" It matters because talk can turn into action. It matters because people already think my husband was a thief. If they start thinking that we're... She couldn't finish the sentence. Then we make them think something else. How? Reed hadn't thought that far ahead, but once he said it, the idea crystallized. We find out what really happened at that mine. We prove your husband didn't steal anything. We clear his name. Mara stared at him. That's impossible. The mine company said the mine company lied, or someone there lied. Either way, there's truth somewhere, and we're going to find it. Why would you do that? Why would you risk? Because it's right. Because your kids deserve to know their father wasn't a thief. Because you deserve to stop running. Reed leaned forward. And because if we prove Owen didn't steal, then that debt Morrison claimed you owed, that disappears too. You're free. Reed, you can't fix this. It's too big. Maybe, but I can try. They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Mara spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Why are you being so kind to us? Reed looked into the fire, seeing Sarah's face in the flames, hearing Emma's voice in the wind outside. Because nobody was kind to my sister when she needed it. Because my wife died and I couldn't save her. Because for 2 years I've been walking around half alive, just going through motions. Then I saw you and your kids eating garbage in the snow, and something in me just broke open. Or maybe woke up, I don't know. He met her eyes. I can't bring back Emma or Sarah, but I can help you. So that's what I'm going to do. Mara wiped at her eyes. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just let your kids sleep safe tonight. That's enough. But that night, safety felt further away than ever. Reed was awakened by the sound of Junie screaming. He was out of bed and running before he was fully awake, his heart pounding. He crashed through the door of the children's room to find Mara already there, holding Junie, while the little girl sobbed and shook. What happened? Reed asked, breathing hard. Nightmare, Mara said, rocking her daughter. Just a nightmare, baby. You're safe. You're safe. But Junie couldn't stop crying, couldn't stop shaking. The cold, she sobbed. Mama, the cold. It was so cold and I couldn't move and you were gone and... Shh. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Caleb was awake too, sitting up in his bed, his face pale. Reed moved to him, putting a hand on his shoulder. You okay? The boy nodded, but his eyes were fixed on his sister. It took nearly an hour to calm Junie down, and even then she wouldn't let go of her mother. Finally, Mara carried her to her own room, Caleb following like a shadow, and Reed heard them all settle into one bed together. He stood in the hallway, listening to Mara's soft voice singing something low and gentle, and he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like a physical thing. These people were damaged, traumatized by loss and hunger and cold. Keeping them fed and warm wasn't enough. He had to help them heal, but he didn't know how. The next morning, Reed rode into Clemens Ridge. He needed supplies, but more than that, he needed information. If he was going to clear Owen Ellington's name, he needed to know what really happened at that mine. The town was buzzing. Reed could feel it the moment he rode in, eyes following him, whispers starting up, people turning to stare. Morrison had done his work well. Everyone knew about Reed taking in the widow and her children. Reed ignored it, tying his horse outside the mercantile and heading inside. Sam Fletcher, the owner, looked up from behind the counter, his face carefully neutral. Morning, Reed. Sam, need some supplies. Sure thing. But Sam's voice was stiff, formal, different from usual. Reed began gathering what he needed: flour, sugar, coffee, dried beans, fabric for making the children proper clothes. As he worked, he felt eyes on him. 2 women at the fabric counter were whispering, their voices just loud enough to be heard. Heard he's got her living there. The Ellington woman. Scandalous. A widow and a widower under one roof? And those children, children of a thief. Reed's hands tightened on the bag of flour he was holding. He set it down carefully and turned to face the women. Beg your pardon, he said quietly, but you're talking about guests in my home. I'd appreciate if you'd show them respect. The women's faces flushed red. We didn't mean... You did mean, but you're wrong. Owen Ellington wasn't a thief, and his widow and children deserve better than your gossip. The mine company said, the mine company lied. Reed's voice was hard now, cutting. Owen Ellington died trying to save men's lives. If you can't speak about him with respect, then don't speak about him at all. He turned back to his supplies, his heart pounding. Behind him, he heard the women leave in a huff. Sam was staring at him. You're making enemies, Reed, Sam said quietly. Don't care. The mine company's powerful. If you start asking questions, then I'll ask questions. Sam, you knew Owen. Was he a thief? Sam was quiet for a long moment. No, he said finally. No, Owen was good people. But Reed, the evidence, what evidence? $300 missing and Owen was the last one in the office? That's not evidence, that's convenience. You can't prove, not yet, but I'm going to. Reed met Sam's eyes. I need to know about the mine collapse. What really happened? Sam glanced toward the door, making sure they were alone. Reed, let it go. Owen's dead. Mara and the kids need to move on. They can't move on while everyone thinks her husband was a thief. Help me, Sam, please. Sam sighed, rubbing his face. All right, but not here. Come by my house tonight after dark. I'll tell you what I know. That night, after the children were asleep, Reed rode back to town. Sam's house was on the edge of Clemens Ridge, a small cabin with a light burning in the window. Sam let him in quickly, checking to make sure no one had seen. This is crazy, Sam said, pouring them both whiskey. You know that, right? Yeah. Tell me about the mine. Sam sat down heavily. The Paradise Mine. Been operating for 5 years. Good silver vein, or so they said. Owen worked there for 3 years, started as a mucker, worked his way up to shift supervisor. He was smart, good with numbers, good with men. And about 6 months before the collapse, he started asking questions. About the timber supports, about the ventilation, about corners being cut. He went to the foremen, then to the mine superintendent, then to the company managers. Nobody wanted to hear it. Why not? Because fixing those problems would cost money and shut down production. The mine company was already in debt, needed to pull out as much silver as possible as fast as possible. Safety was inconvenient. Reed felt cold fury building in his chest. So they ignored him. Worse, they started making his life difficult, cutting his hours, giving him the worst shifts, spreading rumors that he was a troublemaker. Owen knew he was being pushed out, but he wouldn't back down. He kept saying someone was going to die if they didn't fix the supports. And then the mine collapsed. Sam nodded. February 3rd, 1882, middle of the day shift. 37 men underground. The main support beam gave way, brought down half the tunnel system. 7 men died, including Owen. He'd gone down there on his day off, said he wanted to check something. When the collapse started, he tried to get the men out. They say he saved 4 lives before the ceiling came down on him. And the money? Went missing the day before the collapse. $300 from the company office. Owen had been in there that morning, meeting with the superintendent. When the money disappeared, they blamed him. Said he took it knowing the mine was going to collapse, trying to make one last score before everything fell apart. But Owen wouldn't steal. Everyone who knew him knew that. And $300? That was nothing compared to what the mine company lost when the tunnel collapsed. Why would Owen risk everything for $300 when he had a good job and a family? He wouldn't, Reed said. So who did take the money? Sam looked at him for a long moment. You really want to know? Yes. Then talk to Jack Mercier. He was the mine superintendent. Owen met with him the morning the money disappeared. After the collapse, Mercier left town real sudden-like. Heard he's down in Silver City now, managing another mine for the same company. Reed committed the name to memory. Jack Mercier. One more thing, Sam said. The company paid out death benefits to all the families except Owen's. Said since he was a thief, his family forfeited the benefit. $200 that would have kept Mara and the kids fed for months. Reed stood. Thank you, Sam. Reed, be careful. The mine company's got reach. They don't like people asking questions. Don't care what they like. Reed rode home through the darkness, his mind working. Jack Mercier. The superintendent who'd met with Owen the morning the money disappeared, who'd left town right after the collapse. That was no coincidence. When he got back to the ranch, Mara was waiting up for him, sitting by the fire. "You went to town," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah." "To ask about Owen." Reed sat down across from her. "I talked to Sam Fletcher. He told me about Jack Mercier." Mara's face went pale. "Mercier? You know him?" "He's the one who accused Owen, who said he'd seen Owen acting suspicious, going through the office. After the collapse, Mercier told everyone Owen had stolen the money and deserved what he got." Mara's hands were shaking. "Owen hated him, said Mercier was corrupt, was cutting corners to line his own pockets. They had terrible arguments about the safety issues. Mercier left town after the collapse. Sam says he's in Silver City now." "So? What does that prove?" "Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But I'm going to find out." Mara stood abruptly. "No, Reed, no. You can't go chasing after Mercier. He's dangerous, and the mine company will... Will what? I'm not afraid of the mine company. You should be. They have power, Reed. They have money and influence, and they'll destroy you if you get in their way. They destroyed Owen. Then I'll be more careful than Owen was. This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is." Reed stood too, facing her. "It became my fight the moment I brought you and your children home. It became my fight the moment I decided your husband's name matters. So I'm going to Silver City, I'm going to find Mercier, and I'm going to get the truth. And if the truth gets you killed, what then? What happens to your ranch, your horses, everything you've built? Then it happens. But I'm not going to stand by and let a good man's name stay buried under lies." Mara was crying now, furious and frightened. "Why? Why does it matter so much to you?" "Because I couldn't save my sister. Because I couldn't save my wife. Because I've spent 2 years drowning in guilt and grief and feeling like there was no point to anything anymore." Reed's voice broke. "But maybe, just maybe, I can save your family. I can give your children back their father's honor. I can give you back your life. So that's what I'm going to do, Mara, whether you like it or not." They stood staring at each other, both breathing hard, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Mara wiped her eyes. "When do you leave?" she asked quietly. 3 days. Soon as I get everything arranged here. I'm coming with you." "No. You're staying with the children. Reed, Mara, they need you here. They need to feel safe, to know you're not going to disappear. I'll be back in a week. Less, if I can manage it." She wanted to argue. He could see it in her face, but she knew he was right. "Be careful," she whispered. "Please. We've lost enough already." Reed nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He left for Silver City 3 days later with enough supplies for a week and a determination that bordered on reckless. Mara and the children stood on the porch watching him go, and Reed felt the weight of their trust like a physical thing. He couldn't fail them. He wouldn't. Silver City sprawled across the valley like a wound that wouldn't heal, all raw wood and mud streets and the constant thunder of stamp mills crushing ore. Reed rode in on the 4th day, his body aching from hard travel, his mind sharp with purpose. The town was twice the size of Clemens Ridge, full of miners and merchants, and the kind of desperate energy that came from men chasing silver dreams that rarely came true. Finding Jack Mercier took less time than Reed expected. The man had an office in the mine company building on the main street, his name painted on the door in fresh gilt letters. Reed stood outside for a moment, studying the building, noting the armed guards at the entrance, the expensive glass windows, the signs of wealth built on the backs of men who worked underground for wages that barely kept them alive. He walked in like he belonged there. The clerk at the front desk looked up, his expression shifting from bored to suspicious in an instant. "Help you?" "Need to see Jack Mercier." "Mr. Mercier doesn't see people without an appointment." Reed pulled out a silver dollar and set it on the desk. "Make an exception." The clerk eyed the coin, then Reed's face, calculating. "What's this about?" "Business from Paradise Mine, Clemens Ridge." The man's expression changed, became wary. "Wait here." Reed waited, studying the office. Everything was new, expensive, maintained. Whatever Mercier was doing here, he was doing it well. too well for a man who'd left his last position under a cloud of controversy. The clerk returned. Mr. Mercier will see you, but you got 10 minutes and you leave any weapons at the desk. Reed unbuckled his gun belt and handed it over, following the clerk down a hallway to a heavy oak door. The clerk knocked once, then opened it. Jack Mercier sat behind a massive desk, a man in his 40s with slicked back hair and the kind of soft hands that never touched a shovel. He looked up when Reed entered, his expression carefully neutral. "You wanted to see me about Paradise Mine," Mercier said. His voice was smooth, practiced. "I don't work there anymore." "I know, you left right after the collapse." Mercier's eyes narrowed slightly. "I left because I was offered a better position here. The collapse was a tragedy, but these things happen in mining. What's your interest in it?" "Owen Ellington." The name hung in the air between them. Mercier's face hardened. "The thief." "What about him?" "He wasn't a thief. The evidence said otherwise." "What evidence?" $300 missing and Owen being in the office that morning. That's not evidence, that's convenience. Reed moved closer to the desk. "You accused a dead man of theft to cover your own corruption." Mercier stood slowly, his face flushing red. "You need to leave. Now." "Owen knew you were cutting corners on safety. He documented it, complained about it, threatened to go to the territorial authorities. So you framed him for theft, and when the mine collapsed, you let a dead man take the blame for your failures. You can't prove any of that." "Not yet, but I will." Mercier smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're wasting your time. Owen Ellington was a troublemaker who stole company money. The mine company investigated thoroughly and found him guilty. His widow and children are living off charity because he destroyed their reputation. That's the truth, Mr. Holloway, and nothing you do will change it." Reed felt cold rage settle in his chest. "You know who I am." "Of course, I make it my business to know who's asking questions about Paradise Mine. You think you're the first person to come sniffing around, trying to make something out of tragedy? You're not. And you won't be successful, just like the others weren't." "What others?" Mercier sat back down, relaxed now, confident. "Owen's brother came here last year, made all kinds of accusations, threatened lawsuits, made a general nuisance of himself. Know where he is now?" Reed's stomach dropped. "Where?" "Left town suddenly, heard he moved to California or Oregon, or somewhere far away where he learned to mind his own business." Mercier's smile widened. "Smart man, eventually." The threat was clear. Reed didn't react to it, just stood there studying Mercier's face, memorizing every detail. "You're wrong about one thing," Reed said quietly. "I'm not like the others. I'm not going anywhere until I prove what you did. Then you're going to have a very long, very unpleasant stay in Silver City." Mercier gestured to the door. "We're done here. And Mr. Holloway, if I were you, I'd worry less about dead men's reputations and more about keeping that widow and her children safe. Accidents happen, especially to people who don't know when to quit." Reed moved before he thought about it, his hand slamming down on Mercier's desk hard enough to make the man jump. "You threatened them again," Reed said, his voice deadly quiet. "And I'll kill you. I don't care about your company, your guards, or your money. You touch those children. You even think about touching them, and I will end you. Are we clear?" Mercier had gone pale, but he recovered quickly. "That's a threat against my life. I have witnesses." "No, that's a promise. Remember the difference." Reed turned and walked out, collecting his gun belt from the wide-eyed clerk. His hands were shaking with rage as he buckled it back on. He'd learned nothing useful, except that Mercier was guilty as hell and dangerous enough to threaten a widow and her children. Reed needed help, real help. Someone who understood how to fight the mine company legally, who had the resources and knowledge to dig up evidence that would stick. He needed a lawyer. He found one that evening in a saloon on the edge of town. Thomas Brennan was drinking alone at a corner table. A man in his 50s with graying hair and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much of the world's ugliness. Reed had gotten his name from the hotel clerk, who'd said Brennan was the only honest lawyer in Silver City, which made him either very brave or very stupid. "Mr. Brennan?" The man looked up. "Depends on who's asking." "Reed Holloway, I need legal help with a mine company case." Brennan laughed, a bitter sound. Then you came to the wrong lawyer. I don't take mine company cases anymore. Why not? Because I like being alive. Brennan gestured to the empty chair. But sit down anyway. I'm curious what kind of fool walks into Silver City asking questions about mine companies. Reed sat, ordered whiskey for both of them, and told Brennan the story. Owen Ellington, the Paradise Mine collapse, the missing money, Mercier's threats. Brennan listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. You're right about one thing, Brennan said when Reed finished. Owen was framed. I'd bet my practice on it. Can you prove it? Maybe, but it'll be dangerous and expensive and might get us both killed. I'll pay whatever it costs. Brennan studied him. Why? Why risk everything for a dead man's reputation? Reed thought about Mara's face when she talked about Owen, about Caleb's fierce defense of his father, about little Junie asking if they were really home. Because his family deserves the truth, Reed said simply. Brennan was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded. All right, I'll help you. But we do this carefully, legally, by the book. No more confronting Mercier directly, no more threats. We gather evidence, build a case, and take it to the territorial court. How long will that take? Months? Maybe a year. I don't have a year. The longer Mara and her children live under that cloud, the worse it gets. Then we'll work fast. Brennan pulled out a notebook. First thing we need is the original mine company records, safety reports, financial documents, everything Owen filed before the collapse. They'll have copies at the territorial office in Helena. Can you get them? I can. I still have contacts from when I worked for the territory. Brennan wrote something down. Second, we need witnesses, miners who worked with Owen, who heard him complain about safety issues, who can testify that he was trying to save lives, not steal money. How do we find them? Most of the survivors from Paradise Mine are scattered now, working other mines, other towns, but I can track them down. Brennan looked up. This is going to cost money, Reed. Legal fees, travel expenses, witness payments. You prepared for that? Reed thought about his savings, built up over 8 years of careful ranching. I'm prepared. Then let's get started. Reed stayed in Silver City for 3 more days while Brennan began the investigation. They started with the county records office, digging through files from the mine collapse. What they found was damning in its absence. All of Owen's safety reports had been removed from the file. Every complaint, every warning, every documented concern was simply gone. Someone cleaned this file, Brennan said, his voice tight with anger. Removed anything that would make the mine company look negligent. Mercier? Probably, or someone working for him. Brennan made notes. But here's the thing about records. They leave traces. Owen would have kept his own copies. Where would his personal effects be? Reed felt something sink in his chest. Mara would have them, if they survived. Then that's where we start next. But before Reed could leave Silver City, trouble found him. He was walking back to his hotel on the 3rd night when 3 men stepped out of an alley. They were big, rough-looking, the kind of men who got paid to solve problems with violence. Reed Holloway, the largest one asked. Reed's hand moved to his gun. Who's asking? Message from Mr. Mercier. Stop asking questions about Paradise Mine. Stop bothering people. Go home and forget about Owen Ellington. And if I don't? The man smiled, showing broken teeth. Then we make sure you can't ask any more questions. Permanent-like. Reed's mind raced, calculating odds. 3 against 1, in a dark street with no witnesses. He could try to fight, but the smart move was to talk his way out. Tell Mercier I got his message, Reed said carefully. I'll think about it. Thinking time's over. We need your answer now. My answer is no. The men moved fast, but Reed was faster. He'd grown up fighting, learned to survive on the streets after Emma died, and he hadn't forgotten those lessons. He drew his gun as he moved, firing once into the ground between them. The shot echoed like thunder in the narrow street. The men froze. Next one goes center mass, Reed said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Your choice. The leader's hand was on his own gun. You can't shoot all 3 of us. No, but I'll get you first. That a trade you're willing to make? The moment stretched out, taut and dangerous. Then voices sounded from the main street, people responding to the gunshot. The leader's eyes flicked toward the sound, calculating. "This ain't over," he said. "Yes, it is. Tell Mercier if he sends anyone after me again, I'll go straight to the territorial marshal. Tell him I got a lawyer now, got documentation, got witnesses. Tell him if anything happens to me, everything I know goes straight to the authorities. He touches me, he touches the widow Ellington or her children, and his whole operation comes down. Make sure he understands that." The men backed away, disappearing into the darkness. Reed kept his gun drawn until they were gone, then holstered it with shaking hands. His bluff had worked, but it had been close. Too close. He packed that night and left before dawn, riding hard for home. He'd been gone 6 days, and every mile that separated him from Mara and the children felt like a weight pressing on his chest. Mercier's threat echoed in his mind. Accidents happen, especially to people who don't know when to quit. Reed pushed his horse harder. He reached the ranch 3 days later, exhausted and filthy from hard travel. The sun was setting as he rode up, painting the house in gold and shadow. He'd never been so relieved to see anything in his life. Mara was on the porch before he'd even dismounted, her face pale with worry. "Thank God, I was so worried. You said a week and it's been 9 days, and I thought, I'm fine, everything's fine." But she was already checking him over, her hands quick and efficient. "You're hurt. There's blood on your shirt." "Not mine. There was some trouble, but I'm okay." "What kind of trouble?" Reed climbed down from his horse, feeling every mile in his bones. "The kind that means we were right. Mercier's guilty, and he knows we're coming for him." The children came running out then, Caleb cautious but clearly relieved, Junie launching herself at Reed with complete trust. He caught her, lifting her up despite his exhaustion. "You came back," she said, her arms tight around his neck. "Of course I came back. I promised, didn't I?" Some people break promises. Reed met Mara's eyes over her daughter's head and saw the truth there. Owen had promised to come home too, and he never did. "I don't break promises," Reed said firmly. "Remember that, Junie." That night, after the children were in bed, Reed told Mara everything. About Mercier, about Brennan, about the missing records and the men in the alley. She listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with each detail. "We're in danger," she said when he finished. "All of us. Not if we're smart. Brennan's working on getting the territorial records. Once we have those, once we can prove the mine company was negligent and Owen was right about the safety concerns, Mercier loses. He can't threaten us if the truth is already public." "How long?" "Brennan thinks maybe 3 weeks to get the documents. Then we file with the territorial court, and 3 weeks. Mara stood abruptly, pacing. "Reed, anything could happen in 3 weeks. Mercier could send more men. He could hurt the children. He won't. I made sure he knows that if anything happens to us, everything goes to the marshal. He's got too much to lose to risk it." "You don't know that." "You're right. I don't." Reed stood too, catching her hands. "But we're not running, Mara. We're not hiding. We're going to see this through." She pulled her hands away, her eyes blazing. "You had no right to put my children in danger for this." "I had every right. You're living in my house, under my protection. That means I decide what risks we take. They're my children. And they deserve to know their father wasn't a thief." Reed's voice rose despite himself. "They deserve to grow up without that shame following them. You think I don't know what it's like to carry that kind of burden? My mother died of shame as much as hunger. My sister died because no one would help a beggar woman's children. I won't let that happen to Caleb and Junie. I won't." Mara was crying now, furious and frightened. "What if you get them killed? What if your pride and your guilt and your need to fix everything gets my babies killed?" "That won't happen. You can't promise that." "No, I can't." Reed's voice dropped. "But I can promise that I'll die before I let anything hurt them. I can promise that every decision I make is about keeping them safe. And I can promise that hiding and running and living in fear isn't a life worth living. Your children need more than survival, Mara. They need hope. They need justice. They need to know their father died a hero, not a thief." She stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so scared." "I know. Me too." Mara collapsed into a chair, her head in her hands. Reed knelt beside her, not touching, just being present. When Owen died, she said quietly, I thought that was the worst thing that could happen. Thought nothing could hurt more than that. But watching my children starve, watching them suffer, knowing I couldn't protect them from the world, that was worse. So much worse. You did protect them. You kept them alive. Barely. And now you're asking me to risk them again. I'm asking you to trust me, to believe that this is the right thing to do, even though it's scary. Reed waited until she looked at him. Your children are already at risk, Mara. Every day they live with Owen's name marked as a thief. They're in danger. Danger of growing up ashamed, of being treated as less, of never escaping that shadow. I'm trying to give them a future free of that. A life where they can hold their heads up and say, my father was a good man. Isn't that worth fighting for? Mara wiped her eyes. What if we lose? Then we lose, but at least we tried. She was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. Finally, she spoke. Owen kept copies of everything. All his reports, all his complaints, all his documentation. He had a ledger where he tracked every safety violation, every conversation with management, every time they ignored his warnings. Reed's heart leaped. Where is it? Hidden. After he died, after they accused him of theft, I hid it. Didn't want the mine company to find it and destroy it. Where? Mara looked at him. That's what I need to tell you. It's in Clemens Ridge, buried behind the church, under a marker stone. I did it at night, didn't tell anyone. It's been there for over a year. We need to get it. I know, but Reed, if we go back there, if people see us digging behind the church, they'll ask questions. And if the mine company finds out what we're looking for, then we go at night. We're quiet, we're careful, and we bring that ledger to Brennan. Once he has Owen's documentation plus the territorial records, we'll have enough to take to court. When? Tomorrow night. No point waiting and giving Mercier more time to make trouble. Mara nodded slowly. All right, but the children stay here. Agreed. Sam Fletcher will watch them. I'll ride over and ask him in the morning. But morning brought a different kind of trouble. Reed was feeding the horses when he heard riders approaching. He stepped out of the barn to see Sheriff Tom Blackwood and 3 deputies riding up the lane, their faces grim. Reed's stomach sank. This wasn't a social call. Morning, Tom, he said carefully. The sheriff dismounted, his hand resting on his gun. Reed, we need to talk. About what? About the widow Ellington, and some very serious allegations. Mara appeared on the porch, the children behind her. Her face had gone white. What allegations? Reed asked, though he already knew. Mercier had moved faster than expected. Got a wire from Silver City yesterday. Seems there was an incident there. Shots fired. 3 men claim you threatened them, drew your weapon unprovoked, made terrorist threats. That's a lie. Maybe, but I got a witness statement signed by a mine superintendent named Jack Mercier. Says you came to his office, made wild accusations, threatened his life, says he's concerned for his safety and the safety of others. Reed felt rage building in his chest. Mercier's corrupt. He framed Owen Ellington for theft to cover his own crimes. I've got evidence. Evidence of what? A man who's been dead over a year? Reed, you're making trouble where there doesn't need to be any. The sheriff's voice was almost gentle. I know you're trying to help the widow, but you can't go around threatening people and shooting at them because you think there was some injustice. I didn't shoot at anyone. I fired a warning shot when 3 men jumped me in an alley. That's not what they say. Of course it's not. They work for Mercier. They're lying. Can you prove that? Reed opened his mouth, then closed it. He couldn't prove it. It was his word against theirs, and they had 3 witnesses to his 1. The sheriff sighed. Reed, I'm going to have to ask you to come into town, answer some questions, get this sorted out. Are you arresting me? Not yet, but if you don't cooperate, I will. Reed looked at Mara, saw the fear in her face, saw her children clinging to her dress. This was Mercier's play. Get Reed away from the ranch, away from Mara and the children, isolate him and make him vulnerable. I'll come, Reed said, but I need to make arrangements for my ranch first, for my guests. You got 2 hours, then we're leaving, with or without your cooperation. The sheriff and his deputies settled in to wait, their presence making it clear this wasn't optional. Reed pulled Mara inside, speaking quickly and quietly. This is Mercier's move. He's trying to separate us, scare us into giving up. It's working. Listen to me. I'll go into town, answer their questions, get this cleared up. While I'm gone, you need to get that ledger. Tonight, after dark. Take Caleb with you. He's old enough to help, and you'll move faster with 2 people. Reed, I can't. You can. You have to. That ledger is the only proof we have. Once you get it, take it straight to Sam Fletcher. Tell him to get it to Thomas Brennan in Silver City. Tell him it's urgent. What if they arrest you? Then Brennan will get me out. But we can't lose that evidence. Everything depends on it. Mara gripped his hands, her fingers cold. Be careful. Please. Always am. Reed gathered a few things, made quick arrangements with one of his ranch hands to watch over things, and then rode into Clemens Ridge with the sheriff and his deputies. The whole way, he was calculating, planning, trying to figure out how Mercier had moved so fast and what his next move would be. The sheriff's office in Clemens Ridge was small, just 2 cells and a front room with a desk. Tom Blackwood was a decent man, fair but by the book, which made him both an ally and a problem. He wouldn't abuse his authority, but he also wouldn't bend the rules. All right, Reed, the sheriff said, settling behind his desk. Tell me your side of what happened in Silver City. Reed told the truth, all of it. His meeting with Mercier, the threats, the men in the alley, his warning shot. The sheriff listened, taking notes, his face giving nothing away. You got anyone who can verify your story? The sheriff asked when Reed finished. Thomas Brennan. He's a lawyer in Silver City. He can confirm I met with him, can confirm what I was investigating. I'll wire him. In the meantime, you're going to have to stay here. Can't have you leaving town while this is being investigated. I'm not under arrest? Not formally, but you're not free to go either. Call it protective custody. Reed wanted to argue, wanted to rage against the injustice of it, but he forced himself to stay calm. How long? Few days, probably, until I hear back from Silver City, verify the facts. Few days. That should be enough time for Mara to get the ledger and get it to Brennan. Should be. Unless something went wrong. That night, locked in a cell that smelled of old sweat and desperation, Reed lay awake staring at the ceiling and praying that Mara would be safe, that she'd get Owen's ledger, that nothing would go wrong. But in his gut, he knew that something already had. Miles away at the ranch, Mara was making her own calculations. She stood at the window long after dark had fallen, watching the road for any sign of movement, any hint of danger. Junie was finally asleep after crying for Reed, and Caleb sat at the kitchen table pretending to read, but really just watching his mother with worried eyes. We're going into town, Mara said finally, her decision made. Caleb looked up. Now? At night? Yes, I need to get something, and we need to do it while it's dark. She moved to him, kneeling so they were eye level. This is important, Caleb. This is about your father, about clearing his name. Can you be brave for me? The boy's chin lifted, so much like Owen it made her heart ache. I can be brave. Good. Get your coat, warm clothes. We'll take the wagon. What about Junie? Mara looked toward the bedroom where her daughter slept. Taking Junie meant slower travel, more risk of her crying or making noise. But leaving her alone at the ranch, even for a few hours, was unthinkable. We take her with us. I'll wrap her warm and she can sleep in the wagon. They prepared quickly and quietly. Mara hitched Reed's gentlest horse to the small wagon, settled Junie into a nest of blankets where she barely stirred, and helped Caleb climb up beside her. The night was cold and clear, stars scattered across the sky like broken glass, the moon a thin crescent that gave just enough light to see by. The ride to Clemens Ridge took 2 hours. Mara kept the horse at a steady walk, avoiding anything that might wake Junie or attract attention. Beside her, Caleb sat silent and watchful, his small body tense with the responsibility she'd given him. Tell me about Papa, he said suddenly, about when he was working at the mine. Mara's throat tightened, but she welcomed the distraction from her fear. Your papa was the bravest man I ever knew. He wasn't afraid of hard work, wasn't afraid of speaking up when he saw something wrong. Is that why they said he was a thief? Because he spoke up? Yes. The people running the mine were cutting corners, making things dangerous for the workers. Your papa documented everything, tried to make them fix it. They didn't like that. So they lied about him. Yes. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Mr. Holloway believes Papa was good. He does. Do you think Mr. Holloway will come back, or will he disappear like Papa did? The question hit Mara like a physical blow. She pulled the wagon to a stop, turning to face her son in the darkness. Caleb, your Papa didn't disappear. He died trying to save people. That's not the same thing. But he's still gone, and now Mr. Holloway's gone too. Reed will come back, he promised. But you can't know that, not for sure. Mara wanted to argue, to promise with certainty that Reed would return, but she'd learned the hard way that the world didn't care about promises. No, she said honestly, I can't know for sure, but I believe he will. And sometimes belief is all we have. They continued toward town, arriving just after midnight. Clemens Ridge was dark and silent, most people long since in bed. Mara guided the wagon to the edge of town, near the church, but not too close, and set the brake. Stay here with Junie, she told Caleb. Keep her quiet if she wakes. I'll be back as soon as I can. I should come with you. No, I need you here, protecting your sister. Can you do that? Caleb nodded, his face pale, but determined in the moonlight. Mara squeezed his hand once, then climbed down from the wagon, taking the small shovel she'd brought from Reed's barn. The church stood dark against the starlit sky, its white paint ghostly in the dim light. Mara moved quickly around to the back, counting her steps from the corner the way she'd memorized. 10 steps east, 5 steps north. There, half hidden by winter-dead grass, was the marker stone. Just a flat rock, nothing special, nothing that would draw attention. Mara knelt and began to dig. The ground was partially frozen, making the work harder than she'd anticipated. Her hands grew numb despite her gloves, her breath coming in white clouds, but she kept digging. 1 foot down. 2 feet. The shovel hit something solid. The wooden box was smaller than she remembered, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from moisture. Mara pulled it free with shaking hands, brushing off the dirt, her heart pounding. Inside would be Owen's ledger, his careful documentation of every safety violation, every ignored warning, every corner cut. Inside would be the truth. Well, what do we have here? Mara's blood turned to ice. She spun around to find Gerald Morrison standing behind her, and he wasn't alone. 2 other men flanked him, both large and mean-looking in the moonlight. Mrs. Ellington, Morrison said, his voice oily with false concern. What are you doing out here at this hour? Digging up graves? Or perhaps digging up evidence? Mara clutched the box to her chest, her mind racing. This is none of your business, Mr. Morrison. Oh, but it is my business. See, I've been keeping an eye on you. Ever since Reed Holloway took you in, I've been watching. And when I heard he'd been arrested in Silver City for threatening a mine superintendent, I got to thinking, what would a desperate widow do if her protector was locked up? What might she try to retrieve? How did you know us? About the ledger? Come now, Mrs. Ellington. You think you're the only one with eyes and ears? The mine company's been looking for Owen's records since the day he died. They knew he kept copies of everything. They just didn't know where. Morrison smiled, showing too many teeth. But I've been patient. Knew eventually you'd lead me right to it. Mara started backing toward the wagon, but the 2 men moved to block her path. She was trapped. Give me the box, Morrison said, extending his hand. No. Mara, don't be foolish. You're a widow with 2 small children and no protection. Reed's in jail, probably going to stay there a good long while. You've got nowhere to go, no one to help you. Give me the box, and maybe I can convince the mine company to be merciful. Merciful? You mean like they were merciful to Owen? Like they were merciful when they let us starve rather than pay his death benefit? Morrison's expression hardened. Your husband was a thief who got what he deserved. Now give me that box before someone gets hurt. Mara looked at the men blocking her path, calculated her chances of breaking through, and knew they were almost 0. But she also knew that if she gave up Owen's ledger, gave up the only evidence they had, then everything Reed had risked would be for nothing. Her husband's name would stay tarnished forever. Her children would grow up carrying that shame. She turned and ran. Not toward the wagon, where Caleb and Junie were vulnerable, but toward the church itself, toward the main street, toward anywhere there might be people or witnesses. Her boots slipped on the frozen ground, and she nearly fell, but she kept running, clutching the box like it was her children's future, which it was. She heard Morrison shouting behind her, heard heavy footsteps pursuing, but she didn't look back. The main street was ahead, just 100 yards. If she could just reach it. A hand grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around. She fell hard, the box flying from her grip, landing in the dirt a few feet away. One of Morrison's men loomed over her, reaching for the box. No! Mara lunged for it, her fingers closing around the oilcloth just as the man's boot came down, pinning her hand to the ground. Pain exploded up her arm. She cried out, trying to pull free, but the man just pressed harder. Morrison appeared above her, reaching down for the box. Stupid woman. All this trouble for a dead man's lies. They're not lies. Mara's voice was raw with pain and fury. Owen documented everything, every violation, every warning, every time you and your friends chose profit over lives. It's all there, and when people see it, they'll know the truth. No one's going to see anything. Morrison pulled the box from her grip, clutching it triumphantly. This evidence is going to disappear, just like Owen's other copies disappeared. And you're going to forget you ever had it. The hell she is, the voice came from the darkness behind Morrison, cold and sharp as a knife. Everyone froze. Sam Fletcher stepped into the moonlight, a shotgun leveled at Morrison's chest. Behind him were two other men from town, both armed. Let her up, Sam said quietly, and give back that box. Morrison's face twisted with rage and fear. This doesn't concern you, Fletcher. Wrong. Mara's under Reed Holloway's protection, which makes her my concern. And you just assaulted a widow in front of witnesses, so you got two choices. Give back the box and walk away, or explain to Sheriff Blackwood why you were attacking a woman behind a church at midnight. The standoff stretched out, taut and dangerous. Finally, Morrison dropped the box in the dirt and stepped back, his hands raised. This isn't over, he said. Yeah, it is. Sam kept his shotgun trained on Morrison while one of his companions helped Mara to her feet. You and your friends are going to leave now. And if I hear about you bothering Mrs. Ellington again, if I hear about anyone from the mine company harassing her or her children, I'm going straight to the territorial marshal with what I know about Paradise Mine. You understand me? Morrison's face was white with fury, but he nodded. He and his men backed away, disappearing into the darkness. Sam lowered his shotgun and turned to Mara. You all right? My hand. She was shaking so hard she could barely speak. Is Caleb, the children? They're fine. Your boy had the sense to come find me when he saw Morrison following you. Smart kid. Relief nearly buckled Mara's knees. Sam caught her elbow, steadying her, then bent to pick up the box. This what I think it is? He asked quietly. Owen's ledger. All his documentation about the mine. Sam looked at the box, then at Mara, then back toward where Morrison had disappeared. You need to get this to Reed's lawyer, tonight, before Morrison tells the mine company what happened. But Reed's in jail. I don't even know how to contact Thomas Brennan. I do. Give me the ledger. I'll ride to Silver City myself, put it directly in Brennan's hands. Sam saw her hesitation. Mara, you gotta trust someone. Let me help. Mara thought about Owen, about all the people who'd failed him when he needed help. But she also thought about Reed, about his determination to clear Owen's name, about the way he'd risked everything for her family. And she thought about Sam, who'd just saved her from Morrison, who'd believed her story when almost no one else would. All right, she said, handing him the box. But Sam, please, this is everything. If we lose it, we won't, I promise. Sam tucked the box under his arm. Now get your children and get back to Reed's ranch. Lock the doors and don't open them for anyone except me or the sheriff. Understand? Mara nodded. Sam walked her back to the wagon where Caleb sat with wide, frightened eyes, Junie stirring in her blankets. You did good, Mara told her son, pulling him close. You were so brave. You saved us. Is Mr. Fletcher really going to help? Yes, he's going to help Papa. They rode back to the ranch in the pre-dawn darkness, Mara's hand throbbing with every jolt of the wagon, but she was smiling through tears, because for the first time in over a year, she had hope. Real hope. 3 days passed with agonizing slowness. Mara kept the children close, spent her nights jumping at every sound, terrified that Morrison or the mine company would come for them. But the ranch stayed quiet, peaceful, only the normal sounds of horses and wind and winter settling in. On the morning of the fourth day, a rider appeared on the horizon. Mara's heart leaped with equal parts hope and fear until she recognized the horse. Reed. He rode into the yard looking exhausted and filthy, but alive. Mara ran to him before he'd even dismounted, and for a moment she forgot propriety, forgot everything except relief. She wrapped her arms around him, holding tight. "You're back," she said, her voice muffled against his coat. "You're really back." Reed's arms came around her, tentative at first, then stronger. "Told you I would be." The children came running then, Junie launching herself at Reed with complete abandon, Caleb more reserved but clearly relieved. They all stood there in the yard for a long moment, a tangle of relief and exhaustion and something that felt dangerously like family. "What happened?" Mar asked finally, stepping back. "The sheriff, did he let you go?" "Did you?" "Thomas Brennan happened. Sam Fletcher got Owen's ledger to him 2 days ago. Brennan went straight to the territorial court with it, filed charges against Jack Mercier for fraud, negligence, and falsifying records. The court issued a warrant for Mercier's arrest and sent word to Sheriff Blackwood to release me immediately." Mara's hand flew to her mouth. "They arrested Mercier?" "Yesterday. And the mine company is under investigation. Turns out Owen documented everything. Safety violations, ignored warnings, even evidence that Mercier himself took the $300 to cover gambling debts." Reed's smile was grim and satisfied. "Your husband was meticulous. Every complaint, every conversation, every violation, all dated and detailed. It's damning evidence." "So Owen's name is cleared, officially. The court issued a statement this morning exonerating Owen Ellington of all charges, said he died a hero trying to save lives." Reed's voice roughened with emotion. "Your husband's death benefit is being reinstated, plus additional compensation for the year of hardship you endured, and the mine company's being fined for negligence." Mara felt her knees give way. Reed caught her, guiding her to sit on the porch steps. She was crying, great gasping sobs of relief and grief and vindication all mixed together. "He was good," she kept saying. "He was good, and now everyone knows. Everyone knows." Reed sat beside her, one arm around her shoulders while she cried. The children pressed close, Caleb trying to be brave, but with tears streaming down his face, Junie crying because everyone else was crying without fully understanding why. When Mara finally composed herself, she found Reed watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "There's more," he said quietly. "More." The investigation into Mercier led them to look at other mine company operations. Turns out Paradise Mine wasn't the only place where corners were being cut. The whole company's corrupt, top to bottom. The territorial governor's shutting them down, revoking their licenses. It's causing a scandal all the way up to Washington. Mara tried to process this. Owen's documentation hadn't just cleared his name. It had exposed a massive corruption scheme. Her husband's careful record-keeping, his insistence on truth, had brought down an entire corrupt operation. "He'd be proud," she said softly. "Owen. He'd be so proud that his records helped other miners, helped protect other families. He should be. He saved lives, Mara. Not just the day he died, but with what he left behind." They sat together on the porch steps as the sun climbed higher, the children playing nearby, and for the first time since Owen died, Mara felt like she could breathe. The weight of accusation and shame that had pressed on her for so long was finally lifted. But peace didn't come easily. That afternoon, riders came. Not Morrison or mine company thugs, but townspeople from Clemens Ridge. At first Mara tensed, expecting trouble, but Reed recognized them and relaxed. "It's all right," he said. "They're here to help." The first to speak was Martha Hendricks, a stern-faced woman who ran the general store. She stepped forward, her expression uncomfortable. "Mrs. Ellington," she said, "we came to apologize. We believe the mine company's lies about your husband. We treated you and your children shamefully. We're sorry." Others echoed her words, their faces showing genuine remorse. They brought gifts, food, clothing for the children, even a small bag of coins collected from families in town. "We can't make up for the year you suffered," Martha continued, "but we'd like to try. Your family is welcome in Clemens Ridge. More than welcome." Mara couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She just nodded, accepting their apologies, accepting their gifts, accepting the fact that sometimes people did change their minds when presented with truth. After the visitors left, Reed and Mara stood on the porch watching them go. "Everything's different now," Mara said. "Owen's name is cleared. We have money. We have the town's respect." She paused. "I could rent a house in Clemens Ridge, start over properly." Reed felt something cold settle in his chest. "Is that what you want?" "I don't know. I don't know what I want." Mara turned to face him. "Reed, you've done so much for us. You've given us shelter, safety. You risked everything to clear Owen's name. But we can't stay here forever. We can't keep imposing. You're not imposing. We are. This is your home, your life. We've disrupted everything." "Good." The word came out fiercer than Reed intended. This place needed disrupting. It needed life in it again. It needed noise and chaos and children running through it. "Reed, stay." He caught her hands, holding them gently. "Please, stay here. You and the children, not as guests, not as charity cases, but as family." Mara's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" Reed took a deep breath, knowing he was about to risk everything. "I'm saying that these last few weeks, having you here, having the children here, it's woken something up in me that I thought died with Sarah. I'm saying that I've gotten used to hearing Junie's laugh and Caleb's questions, and your voice singing to them at night. I'm saying that when I was locked up in that cell, all I could think about was getting back here to you. To all of you." "Reed, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to." Reed squeezed her hands. "Mara, I'm not asking you to forget Owen. I'm not trying to replace him. But I'm asking if maybe there's room in your life for something new, for someone who wants to take care of you and your children, not out of duty or charity, but because I've come to—" He swallowed hard. "Because I've come to care for all of you." Mara was crying again, but smiling through the tears. "I don't know how to do this. How to move forward. It feels like betraying Owen's memory." "Owen would want you to be happy, would want his children taken care of, would want them growing up with someone who loves them." Reed paused. "And I do love them, Mara. Somewhere along the way, I fell in love with your children, and with you." The words hung in the cold air between them. Mara stared at him, her face showing shock and fear, and something that might have been hope. "I'm broken," she whispered. "I'm damaged and scared, and I don't know if I have anything left to give." "Then we'll be broken together. We'll figure it out together." Reed pulled her closer. "I'm not asking for an answer today. I'm just asking you to think about it, about staying, about building something new here." Before Mara could respond, Junie came running around the corner, her face bright with excitement. "Mama, Caleb found a bird's nest in the barn. Can we keep it?" The moment shattered into ordinary life. Mara wiped her eyes, composed herself, and turned to her daughter. "Let's go look at it together." But as they walked toward the barn, she reached back and took Reed's hand, holding it tight. That night, while the children slept, Reed and Mara sat by the fire talking. Really talking, for the first time since she'd arrived. She told him about her life with Owen, about their courtship and marriage, about the joy of having children and the terror of losing him. Reed told her about Sarah, about their dreams for the ranch, about the emptiness that had consumed him after her death. "I never thought I'd feel anything again," Reed admitted. "Never thought I'd want to. It hurt less to be numb." "I know that feeling. But then I saw you and your children eating scraps in that alley, and something just broke open. Or maybe woke up, I don't know. All I know is that I couldn't walk away." "I'm glad you didn't." Mara stared into the fire. "Reed, I need time. I need to figure out who I am without being Owen's wife. I need to teach my children how to be happy again. I need time." "I know. Take all you need. But I want you to know that I feel something too. Something that scares me because it feels like moving on, like leaving Owen behind. But he's not here, and you are. And my children are starting to smile again because of you." Reed reached over and took her hand. "We'll go slow. Figure it out as we go." "Slow sounds good." They sat together in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, while the fire burned low and the night deepened around them. Outside, the first snow of December began to fall, soft and silent, covering the ranch in white. Inside, in the warmth and light, two broken people were beginning to heal. Two families separated by loss were starting to become one family united by hope. It wouldn't be easy. They'd have setbacks and doubts, and days when the past seemed more real than the future. But they'd face it together, this quiet rancher and determined widow, these children who'd learned too young what it meant to survive. And slowly, carefully, in the way of all healing things, they'd build something new from the broken pieces of what they'd lost. Something that looked a lot like home. Winter settled over the ranch like a blessing and a test all at once. The snow that had begun falling that night continued through the weeks, transforming the Montana landscape into something clean and new, as if the world itself was offering them a fresh start. But beneath the beauty, Reed knew that decisions still needed to be made, words still needed to be spoken, and the future still hung uncertain between them. The children adapted faster than the adults. Caleb began helping Reed with the horses every morning, his small hands learning to be gentle and firm at the same time, his questions endless and eager. Junie followed Mara everywhere, her laughter gradually replacing the fearful silence that had marked her first weeks at the ranch. At night, they no longer woke screaming from nightmares of cold and hunger. They slept peacefully, safely, in beds that had become theirs. But Mara moved through the house like someone still waiting for permission to stay, still expecting the dream to shatter. She cooked and cleaned and cared for the children with fierce devotion, but Reed could see her holding back, keeping walls up, protecting herself against the possibility of another loss. 3 weeks after Reed returned from jail, on a morning bright with sun reflecting off fresh snow, everything changed again. A rider came up the lane carrying official-looking documents. Reed met him on the porch, Mara standing just inside the doorway, her body tense with old fears. "Reed Holloway?" the rider asked. "That's me. Got papers from the territorial court. Need your signature." The man handed over a thick envelope, waited while Reed signed for it, then rode off without ceremony. Reed opened the envelope with Mara watching anxiously. Inside were legal documents, official seals, and a letter from Thomas Brennan. Reed read quickly, his expression shifting from confusion to shock to something like joy. "What is it?" Mara asked, unable to bear the silence. "It's from the court. About the mine company settlement." Reed looked up at her, his eyes bright. "Mara, they're not just giving you Owen's death benefit. The court ruled that the mine company's negligence directly caused his death and the deaths of the other 6 men. They're awarding damages. Significant damages." "How much?" Reed showed her the number. Mara went pale, reaching for the doorframe to steady herself. That's not possible. That's more money than Owen would have made in 10 years. It's what you're owed, what you and every other widow is owed. The court's splitting the settlement between all 7 families. Reed kept reading. And there's more. The territorial governor wants to honor Owen posthumously. There's going to be a ceremony in Helena next month. They're calling him a hero, Mara. They want to recognize what he did, how his documentation helped expose the corruption. Mara sank down onto the porch step, the papers trembling in her hands. "I don't want ceremonies. I don't want recognition. I just want—" Her voice broke. "I just wanted people to know he was good, that he wasn't a thief, that he died trying to save lives. Now they will. Everyone will know. But he's still gone. The money doesn't bring him back. The recognition doesn't bring him back." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I'm grateful, Reed. I am. But it doesn't fix the hole in my children's lives. It doesn't give them back their father." Reed sat down beside her, not touching, just being present. "No, nothing can do that. But it gives them security. It gives them a future. It gives them the ability to hold their heads up and be proud of who their father was." I know that. It's just—" Mara wiped her eyes roughly. "It's just that some part of me has been so angry at Owen for dying, for leaving us alone, for choosing to be heroic instead of choosing to stay safe for his family. And now everyone's calling him a hero, and I'm supposed to be proud, but all I feel is angry and guilty and confused." "That's okay. You're allowed to feel all those things." "Am I? Am I allowed to be furious with my dead husband for getting himself killed? Am I allowed to wish he'd been a coward who ran instead of a hero who died? Yes, you're allowed to feel whatever you feel. There's no right way to grieve. Mara let out a shaking breath. Sometimes I can't even remember his face clearly anymore. I have to look at the photograph to remember exactly what he looked like. And that terrifies me. What if I forget him completely? What if my children forget him? They won't forget. You won't let them. Reed chose his next words carefully. But Mara, remembering Owen doesn't mean you have to stop living. Honoring his memory doesn't mean you have to stay frozen in the moment he died. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Reed saw something raw and vulnerable in her expression. I'm scared. I'm terrified of being happy again, because what if I lose it? What if I let myself care about you and something happens and I have to go through this all over again? You might. That's the risk of caring about anyone. Reed took her hand, gentle but firm. But Mara, you're already going through it. You're already scared. The question is whether you're going to let that fear keep you from living or whether you're going to choose to live anyway. Before Mara could respond, Caleb appeared in the doorway. Mama, is everything okay? Are we in trouble? Mara quickly wiped her eyes and summoned a smile. No, baby, everything's fine. Actually, everything's wonderful. Come here. She pulled Caleb onto her lap, even though he was really too big for it, and showed him the papers. Remember how we talked about your papa being a hero? About how he tried to save people? Yes. Well, the territorial governor agrees. They're going to have a ceremony to honor your papa and the other men who died, and they're giving us money to help take care of us, to make sure we're okay. Caleb studied the papers with serious eyes. Does this mean we don't have to leave? We can stay here with Mr. Holloway? Mara's eyes flew to Reed's face, saw the hope there, the question. I don't know, Caleb. We haven't... I want to stay, Caleb said firmly. I like it here. I like the horses, and I like Mr. Holloway, and I like having a real house. Can we stay, Mama? Please? Sweetheart, it's complicated. Why? Mr. Holloway said we could stay as long as we wanted, and he likes us, I can tell. So why can't we just stay forever? Out of the mouths of children, Reed thought. Why not indeed? Junie had wandered out now too, drawn by the sound of voices. She climbed into Reed's lap without hesitation, a gesture of trust that still made his throat tight. Are we talking about staying? I want to stay too. This is home now. Mara looked at her children, both of them gazing at her with hope and trust, and then at Reed, who was watching her with patience and something deeper, something that made her heart race with fear and longing all mixed together. Let's talk about this inside, she said finally, where it's warm. They gathered in the kitchen, the children at the table with cups of hot milk, Reed and Mara standing by the stove. Mara took a deep breath, steadying herself. Your papa was the best man I ever knew, she began, speaking to her children but aware of Reed listening. He loved you both more than anything in the world. He died being brave, being the man he always was. Nothing will ever change that, and nothing should. But, Caleb prompted, sensing there was more. But Papa's gone, and we have to figure out how to live without him. How to be happy again without forgetting him. Mara's voice shook slightly. Mr. Holloway has been incredibly kind to us. He's given us a home, kept us safe, fought to clear Papa's name. He's become important to us. To me. Reed reached out and took her hand, giving her strength. What I'm trying to say, Mara continued, is that I think Mr. Holloway is right. I think we could build something new here, something that honors Papa's memory but also looks forward to the future. But I need to know how you two feel about that, about staying here permanently, about Mr. Holloway becoming part of our family. Caleb and Junie looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that siblings have. Then Caleb spoke. Papa would want us to be safe and happy. I remember him saying that. He said his job was to make sure we were always safe and happy. The boy's voice was steady, wise beyond his years. We're safe here. We're happy here. I think Papa would be glad we found Mr. Holloway. I think Papa sent Mr. Holloway to find us, Junie added with a child's absolute certainty. In the snow that night, Papa was watching and he sent Mr. Holloway to take care of us because he couldn't do it anymore. Mara's eyes filled with tears. Maybe Junie was right. Maybe in some inexplicable way, Owen had led Reed to them that December night. Or maybe it was just chance, just Reed being in the right place at the right time. Either way, the result was the same. "All right," Mara said, squeezing Reed's hand. "All right, we'll stay, if Mr. Holloway still wants us." "I want you," Reed said simply. "All of you. For as long as you'll have me?" The children cheered, jumping up to hug first their mother, then Reed, creating a tangle of arms and joy and relief. Over their heads, Mara and Reed's eyes met, and something passed between them. A promise, a commitment, a beginning. But that night, after the children were in bed, Mara found Reed standing on the porch, staring out at the snow-covered ranch. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and joined him in the cold. "Having second thoughts?" she asked softly. "No, just thinking about Sarah, about whether I'm betraying her memory by doing this." "Are you?" Reed was quiet for a long moment. "I don't think so. I think Sarah would understand. She always wanted this place to be full of life and love. She'd be happy to see children running through these rooms again." "Tell me about her," Mara said. "Not just that she died, but who she was, what she loved." So Reed talked, really talked, about Sarah for the first time since her death, about how they'd met at a church social, about her terrible singing voice and her incredible baking, about the way she'd insisted on painting the kitchen yellow because she said it made mornings feel happier. He talked about their dreams for the ranch, for children, for a life together. "She sounds wonderful," Mara said when he finished. "She was. And I loved her, still love her, in a way." Reed turned to face Mara. "But she's gone. And you're here. And what I feel for you isn't the same as what I felt for Sarah, but it's real. It's true." "What do you feel?" Reed took a breath. "I feel like I can breathe again. Like I've been holding my breath for 2 years and suddenly I remembered how. I feel like this house is a home again, instead of a museum. I feel like every morning I wake up is a morning worth waking up for." He reached out and touched her face gently. "I feel like maybe I get a second chance at happiness, at family, at love." Mara turned her face into his palm, a gesture of trust and surrender. "I'm scared, Reed, so scared of losing again, of letting myself love and then having it ripped away." "I know, me too. But I think I want to try anyway." Reed pulled her close, and Mara let herself lean into him, let herself accept the comfort and strength he offered. They stood together on the porch, two people who'd lost everything finding something new in each other, while the winter wind whispered around them and the stars wheeled overhead. "We should probably get married," Reed said after a while. "If you're staying, if we're building a life together, people will talk less if we make it official." Mara laughed softly. "Is that a proposal?" "It's a practical suggestion." "How romantic!" Reed pulled back to look at her, suddenly serious. "Mara Ellington, will you marry me? Not because it's practical or proper, but because I want to spend my days working beside you and my nights keeping you warm. Because your children have become my children in my heart. Because when I think about the future now, I can't imagine it without you in it." "Yes," Mara said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I'll marry you." They kissed then, gentle and tentative, like teenagers instead of two people who'd both been married before. It was sweet and careful and full of promise. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, on a cold February day that held the first hints of spring. Thomas Brennan came from Silver City to stand as Reed's witness. Sam Fletcher gave Mara away, and his wife Martha helped her into a simple blue dress that had been Sarah's but fit Mara like it was made for her. The ceremony was held in the church in Clemens Ridge, the same church where Mara had buried Owen's ledger. The town turned out in force, no longer suspicious or judgmental, but genuinely happy to witness this union. The children stood beside their mother, Caleb solemn and proud in a new suit, Junie scattering wildflowers she'd insisted on bringing even though it was winter. When Reed and Mara exchanged their vows, speaking promises of love and loyalty and partnership, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. This wasn't just a marriage, it was a resurrection. Two people who'd been buried by grief digging their way back to life. The reception was held at the ranch, neighbors and friends crowding into the house that had stood empty for so long. There was food and music and laughter, and for the first time in years, the Holloway Ranch felt the way it was meant to feel, alive. Late in the evening, Reed found himself standing with Thomas Brennan by the fireplace, watching Mara dance with Caleb while Junie spun in dizzy circles nearby. "You did good," Brennan said, "clearing Owen's name, giving his family a future, finding yourself a family in the process. Couldn't have done it without you. Maybe. But you're the one who wouldn't quit. You're the one who looked at a widow and her children eating scraps and decided to do something about it." Brennan raised his glass. "To stubbornness and compassion. May they always go hand in hand." Reed clinked his glass against Brennan's, but his eyes were on Mara. She looked up then, as if feeling his gaze, and smiled at him across the room. A smile full of joy and peace and hope. Later, after the guests had left and the children were asleep, Reed and Mara stood together in the bedroom that was now theirs. Their wedding night felt both momentous and ordinary, weighted with significance, but also comfortable, easy, right. "I never thought I'd be here," Mara said, looking around the room that had been Sarah's, that was now hers. "Never thought I'd feel safe again, feel happy again." "Neither did I." She turned to face him. "I want you to know something. This doesn't erase Owen. It doesn't mean I've forgotten him or that he doesn't matter anymore. I know. But it does mean I'm choosing to live again, to love again, to believe in the future again." She took his hands. "Thank you for making that possible. Thank you for letting me." They came together then, two broken people made whole not by forgetting the past, but by choosing to build a future anyway. In the darkness of that February night, in the house that had known so much loss, love bloomed again, different than before, but no less real. Spring came early that year, as if the land itself was eager to shake off winter's grip. The snow melted, revealing brown grass that would soon turn green. Birds returned, building nests in the barn and trees, and in the pasture, 4 mares gave birth to foals that Caleb and Junie helped Reed care for with gentle, careful hands. Life settled into a rhythm on the Holloway ranch. Reed worked the horses. Mara kept the house and garden. The children grew stronger and more confident with each passing day. They were becoming a family in the truest sense, not bound by blood, but by choice, by shared hardship, by love that had been tested and proven true. One warm April morning, Reed found Mara standing at the kitchen window, her hand resting on her stomach, a secret smile on her face. "You all right?" he asked. "More than all right." She turned to face him, and he saw tears in her eyes, but they were happy tears. "Reed, I'm pregnant." For a moment, Reed couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Sarah had died in childbirth. His son had never drawn breath. The fear of losing another wife, another child, crashed over him like a physical wave. Mara saw it in his face and crossed to him quickly, taking his hands. "I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But Reed, this is a good thing, a blessing, a new life for our new family. What if something happens? What if I lose you the way I lost Sarah? Then you'll survive it, the way you survived losing Sarah, the way I survived losing Owen." She squeezed his hands. "But nothing's going to happen. I'm strong, I'm healthy, and we'll get the best doctor in the territory to be there when the time comes." Reed pulled her close, holding her like she might disappear. "I can't lose you. I can't lose another family." "You won't. I promise." Mara pulled back to look at him. "This baby is a sign, Reed. A sign that life goes on, that joy can come after sorrow, that our family is growing, not ending." She was right. Reed knew she was right, but the fear lingered, a shadow over the joy he should have been feeling. The children were ecstatic when they were told. Junie immediately began planning what the baby would need, chattering endlessly about cribs and clothes and whether it would be a brother or sister. Caleb was more reserved but clearly pleased, already imagining teaching the baby about horses the way Reed had taught him. As Mara's pregnancy progressed through spring into summer, the town of Clemens Ridge rallied around them. Women brought baby clothes and advice. Men helped Reed expand the house, adding a nursery. The community that had once shunned Mara now embraced her as one of their own. In late May, there was a ceremony in Helena, as promised. The territorial governor posthumously honored Owen Ellington and the 6 other men who died in the Paradise Mine collapse. Mara, Reed, and the children traveled to attend, along with the other widows and families. It was a bittersweet day. The governor's speech was moving, calling Owen a hero who'd sacrificed his life to save others, and whose documentation had exposed corruption and made mines safer across the territory. A memorial was unveiled, 7 names carved in stone, Owen's among them. Caleb stood very straight throughout the ceremony, his hand in his mother's, his face solemn. When it was over, he walked to the memorial and touched his father's name. "I'm proud of you, Papa," he said quietly. "I'm proud you were brave, and I'm sorry I was angry at you for dying." Mara knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face.
"Papa loved you so much, Caleb. He loved all of us, and he'd be so proud of the man you're becoming. Do you think he knows? About Mr. Holloway? About the baby?" "I think he knows, and I think he's happy we found someone to take care of us." That night, in their hotel room in Helena, Reed found Mara standing at the window, looking out at the city lights. "You okay?" he asked. "I was just thinking about Owen, about how proud he would have been today, how vindicated." She turned to face Reed. "And I was thinking about how lucky I am, that I got to love 2 good men in one lifetime, that Owen gave me Caleb and Junie, and you're giving me a new beginning." Reed crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her and the growing swell of their child. "I'm the lucky one." "We both are." They stood together in the darkness, and Reed realized that for the first time since Sarah died, he wasn't haunted by loss. He was grateful for what he had, for what they'd built together, for the future stretching out before them. Summer deepened into August, and Mara's time grew near. Reed became increasingly protective, hovering like a worried mother hen, driving Mara to distraction with his constant concern. "I'm fine," she kept telling him. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Not my women," Reed muttered, checking again to make sure the doctor's bag was packed and ready. Labor began on a hot August night, and this time Reed was determined to be present, to not be shut out the way he'd been with Sarah. The doctor came, along with 2 experienced midwives from town. They sat up in the bedroom while Reed paced outside, listening to Mara's labored breathing and trying not to think about Sarah's screams, about the terrible silence that had followed. The children were with Sam and Martha Fletcher in town, spared the worry and waiting. Reed was alone with his fear, with memories of loss, with prayers he wasn't sure anyone was hearing. Hours passed. The doctor came out once, his face serious. "It's taking longer than we'd like, but she's strong. The baby's in a good position, just needs time." More waiting, more pacing, more fear. Then, as the sun was rising on a new day, Reed heard it, the thin, angry wail of a newborn baby. He froze, afraid to hope, afraid to believe. The door opened. The midwife stood there, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Holloway, and your wife is fine. Tired, but fine." Reed's legs nearly gave out. He stumbled into the room to find Mara propped up against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up when he entered, and her smile was everything. "Come meet your son," she said. Reed crossed to the bed on shaking legs and looked down at the baby. He was perfect, tiny, red-faced, squalling with healthy lungs. Owen's son. His son. Their son. "He's beautiful," Reed managed. "He's loud," Mara said with a tired laugh. "Takes after his sister that way." The baby quieted as Reed carefully took him, cradling the impossibly small weight. The infant's eyes opened, unfocused and dark, and Reed felt something crack open in his chest, the last wall of grief and fear crumbling away, leaving only love. "What should we name him?" Mara asked. Reed thought about Owen, about Sarah, about all the people they'd loved and lost. "Owen," he said. "Owen Reed Holloway, after his mother's first husband who died a hero, after both his fathers." Mara's eyes filled with tears. "You mean that? You'd name our son after Owen?" "He was a good man who deserves to be remembered, and this way Caleb and Junie's father's name lives on." Reed looked down at the baby. "This way everyone remembers that our family was built on the foundation Owen laid." "Thank you," Mara whispered. "Thank you for understanding that." When Caleb and Junie were brought home later that day and met their new baby brother, they were awed and excited and tender in the way children can be with something precious and fragile. Caleb carefully touched the baby's tiny hand,
and when Owen Reed's fingers wrapped around his, the boy smiled. "I'm going to teach him everything," Caleb announced, "about horses and ranching and being brave like our papa was." "Both our papas," Junie corrected, "because now we have two papas, the one in heaven and the one here." Out of the mouths of children again. Reed looked at Mara over their children's heads and saw his own emotion reflected back, gratitude, joy, and the quiet certainty that they'd been given something rare and precious. A second chance. A new family forged from the ashes of old loss. The years that followed were marked by growth and change and the ordinary miracles of family life. The ranch prospered under Reed's careful management. Mara's settlement money was invested wisely, ensuring security for all of them. Caleb grew into a fine young man, skilled with horses and responsible beyond his years. Junie blossomed into a bright, curious girl who could ride like the wind and had her mother's fierce determination. Little Owen Reed, called Reed by everyone to avoid confusion, grew up surrounded by love and siblings and horses, never knowing hunger or cold or fear. More children came in time. A daughter that Reed and Mara named Sarah, honoring Reed's first wife, and then twin boys who kept everyone on their toes. The house that had stood silent and empty for so long rang with laughter and arguments and the chaotic music of a large, happy family. The mine company's corruption scandal continued to reverberate for years. Jack Mercier was convicted and imprisoned. The company itself was dissolved, its assets sold off to pay settlements. New safety regulations were implemented across the territory, saving countless lives. Owen Ellington's ledger was preserved in the territorial archives as a historical document, a testament to one man's courage and commitment to truth. Gerald Morrison lost his restaurant eventually, his business destroyed by his association with the mine company's crimes. But in a turn that surprised everyone, it was Reed and Mara who helped him afterward, offering him work on their ranch. Morrison was humbled, chastened, and eventually became a loyal friend, proof that people could change when given the chance. Sam Fletcher remained a trusted friend and advisor. Thomas Brennan became young Owen Reed's godfather and a regular visitor to the ranch, always bringing books and stories from his travels. The ranch itself became something more than just Reed's home. It became a haven. When other families fell on hard times, when widows and orphans needed help, they found their way to the Holloway Ranch and were taken in, given work and dignity, and a chance to start over. It became known throughout Montana Territory as a place of second chances, a place where broken people could heal. 10 years after that December night when Reed found Mara and her children eating scraps behind a restaurant, he stood on the porch of his ranch house and looked out over the life they'd built. The pastures were full of horses. The barn was solid and well-maintained. The house was warm and loud with children and life. Mara came out to join him, her hair now showing threads of silver, her face marked by years of laughter and love. She slipped her hand into his, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About that night. About how close I came to just walking past you, to letting you stay invisible." "But you didn't. You stopped. You saw us." "Best decision I ever made." Reed pulled her close. "You saved my life as much as I saved yours. We saved each other." They stood together in the fading light, watching their children play in the yard, all of them, biological and chosen, blood and heart. This was family. This was home. This was what they'd built from nothing, from loss, from the courage to try again. Inside the house, young Owen Reed, now 10 years old and the spitting image of the father he was named for, was asking Caleb questions about the famous grandfather he'd never met. Caleb, now 17 and soon to head off to university on a scholarship funded by the mine settlement, was showing him the photograph of Owen Ellington, telling him stories about a man who'd died a hero. "Our first papa," Owen Reed said, touching the photograph carefully. "Yes," Caleb confirmed. "The man who gave us our name and our pride, who taught us that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard. And then Mr. Holloway, Papa Reed, he found you and Mama and Junie? He found us eating garbage in an alley, and he said, 'Pack your things, we're going home.'" Caleb smiled at the memory, "And he brought us here, and everything changed." Owen Reed considered this, his young face serious. "So we're lucky." The luckiest, Caleb agreed. Outside on the porch, Reed and Mara heard this exchange and shared a look. They understand, Mara said softly. They understand that our family is special, that we chose each other. They do, and they'll carry that forward. They'll remember that family isn't just blood. It's choosing to love, choosing to stay, choosing to build something good even when the world's been hard. As the sun set over the Montana landscape, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, the Holloway family gathered for dinner, all of them around one table. Reed and Mara, Caleb and Junie, young Owen Reed, little Sarah, the twins, and two other children they'd taken in that year when their parents died in a ranch accident. They said grace, thanking God for the food and for each other and for second chances. Then the chaos of a family meal began, passing dishes, telling stories, laughing, arguing, living. This was what Reed had chosen that December night when he stopped in a snow-filled alley, not just to feed 3 hungry people, but to save himself from a slow death of loneliness and grief. Not just to give Mara and her children a home, but to receive the gift of family he'd thought he'd lost forever. They'd survived storms both literal and metaphorical. They'd faced down corruption and cruelty. They'd fought for justice and won. But more importantly, they'd learned to love again after loss, to trust again after betrayal, to hope again after despair. The ranch house that night glowed with lamplight, warm and welcoming in the darkness. Inside, a family ate and laughed and loved. A family built not from blood alone, but from courage, compassion, and the simple act of one man who wouldn't look away from suffering. Years later, when Reed was old and gray and surrounded by grandchildren, he would tell them the story about a winter night in Montana Territory, about a widow and her children eating scraps, about a choice to stop, to see, to help. "Pack your things. We're going home," he'd told Mara that night, not knowing he was talking about himself as much as her, not knowing that in saving her family, he was saving himself. And they'd gone home together, and they'd built a life that honored the past while embracing the future. And they'd proven that even after the darkest winter, spring could come again. That love could bloom in the most unexpected places. That family was something you built, not something you were born into. That sometimes the greatest courage was simply choosing to live again, to love again, to believe again. The Holloway Ranch stood as a testament to all of this, a place of warmth in a cold world, a haven for the broken, a home where second chances became new beginnings. And it all started with a cowboy who looked at a desperate widow and said the words that would change 5 lives forever. "Pack your things. We're going home." And they did. And they were.